while we're waiting, I'm curious, is there a way, like if people are gonna try to contribute and maybe do some PRs or something on this code, is there a way to like not not fuck up your formatting?
Sure.
Most like
I'm sure there's ways. I mean, I'm kind of awkward with GitHub too, but when you say fuck up formatting, do you mean like
well, like most
linting
linters will just they'll like totally, because you've got this very, very compact just structure, which is really makes it readable, but then like most linters don't like it.
Yeah, linters like to keep to 80 lines.
Linters probably hate people at this point. They probably really hate how I use the curly brackets. I'm kind of neurotic about those, and I think you'll see some of these more opinionated spacings, and mature contracts, and if Compound has some really funky stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's super nice, like the tabs on your like state variables and stuff. Like that's how it should be done, I think. But then most linters don't like that.
Oh yeah. Where was it? There was one like really like
no
sexy
tabs.
thing I saw on Compound.
Spaces only, please.
Where is it? It might be the Delegator. Oh yeah, look at this bad boy. Yeah, that's what I like to see. Anyways. Also, Pat, I really like your tweet about the Solidity masterclass. For sure. it's like an odds import for ERC20, then like constructor parameters, and you're pretty much like coding 90% of contracts. But for DAOs, I think there's some room for finesse, and largely it's a battle of gas efficiency. Anyway, so it seems like we have MK. I don't know your actual name or what you'll be called by, but I say we give it till 4 or 5, and then we just start going almost like from the top. Let it drop.
Oh yeah, I was saying make dir because I'm used to the.
Yeah, you can call me Victor or John. Up to you.
Okay. Lots of Johns.
Victor. That works for me. Also, for auditability, like I think line by line comments are like kind of way to go. But I digress. 1 more minute. Yeah, what's up, Bill?
Hey, sorry I'm a little late.
All good. I think we're also recording, so this can be like repurposed.
Oh, cool.
Right. Okay. I see we just start talking about the contract. As I said earlier, my goal was to try and hit all the features, the wish list items from Moloch V2 users that we've discussed in the Mystics group over the past year, and see if I can squash that into a single file. Bill and I, like really earlier on when we're looking at V2 upgrades, we're like, what if we combined sort of the the ACE innovation of minions and try to put more into a single sort of membership contract that can upgrade easily to other DAOs, through these ACE actions, as well as control contracts, mint new tokens, and basically like do a lot more with DeFi without having to necessarily build special purpose minions for those actions. So that's kind of the rough start to Baal as a design, and now as a proposed sort of Moloch V3 upgrade. I think we fit most of the features that people want, and let's see if it can actually work, right? And if it can work, can we make it the most gas efficient, minimalist DAO, so then developers can keep building awesome stuff and extensions and not need to necessarily read 10,000 lines of code to understand how to make a very small PR. With Baal, you guys probably recognize a lot of the formatting. How we've organized things. We have familiar to Moloch V2, an array of authorized tokens for rage quitting. There's always this kind of sense that some tokens might be poison pills. If you put a token into a DAO and it's paused, that will break transfers, and generally people want to avoid those sort of attacks. So whitelisting tokens has been a sort of way for DAOs to create, these sort of banking account positions for their members, but not have this issue where everything gets broken. So we have guild tokens that are authorized by whitelist proposals. We can get down to proposal types in a second. We have an upgrade here with a member list. And I think, Bill, you've incorporated this into Peeps DAOs, where we basically have a sort of standing list, an array of members. This makes it easier, to just like get a good list for airdrops. And also, I think it's very familiar to just like look at an array and figure out who all is in your DAO. That is something that was very easy to incorporate. Proposal count, that's straight up from Moloch V2. Every proposal increments. We have total loot, total supply. I think I could explain. This is basically for ERC20 token purposes. This replaces sort of the total shares, idea in Moloch. So not that complicated. We're just making shares ERC20 tokens. And that's a way to account for that and have it show up in people's wallets and be very obvious. This is an internal tracker for total shares and loot. And this is kind of the number that we use to determine a fair share when people rage quit. That's also from Moloch V2. One thing that Bill added that I thought was like very dope was minimum and maximum voting periods. So this, I think, makes it very flexible for certain proposals that are like, I think, low cognitive stuff. It could be like a signaling proposal. You don't want to spend any money necessarily, but you want to ratify a proposal or a plan or an agreement by the DAO. You might just set that to very, very low voting period because there is some sort of variability about, which proposals matter and how long we really think people need to deliberate about that. These are amendable. This is also an improvement on Moloch DAO V2. In Moloch DAO V2, after you deploy, you're basically stuck with the voting period that you have on deployment. And to change that, you would have to redeploy your entire DAO. Not a huge deal, but if we can offer adjustable voting periods, it seems like an obvious improvement. Other things I've done, I've added transferability to shares and loot, but as a sort of safeguard. Obviously not all DAO want open permission to their membership. So they might initialize and say no transfers of shares or no transfers of loot because we don't want some like shark to rage quit and like attack our DAO or something. Those are options that can also be amended and changed through what I call period proposal. We'll get to that later. These are familiar to people who've looked at tokens, a name and a symbol. This is what OpenZeppelin calls ERC20 metadata. I just find it easier just like put all this into a single file, but Bill, I definitely appreciate that. Like if we can use OpenZeppelin to save gas or to make things better for users, like we got to do that.
Yeah, I think we can just make this contract and ERC, like do the is ERC20, then reduce a little bit of the code in this core contract and instead lean on OpenZeppelin for things like the name, the symbol, balance of, and then just override or have like a before transfer function to accomplish some of the like transfer restrictions on transferability of shares, etc. But that's just my opinion. I'm playing with it on my end to see whether
we should
I
definitely
like
try it. Yeah, because I think like go on.
in the Open Zeppelin contracts, I like those hooks that they have of like before and after transactions.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah, I
are-
think the before transaction is one where that's where I started digging in, Ross, because you've been doing some cool stuff on the transfer and transfer from function. But I that's where I just want to like make sure that we could use the hook for before, like before I override the ERC20 or the like core transfer or transfer from function. I kind of want to see like should we lean on that from the ERC20 contract and instead override the before transfer or after transfer in order to just like make sure that people can't send their tokens or their voting tokens without the rules of the DAO being followed, etc.
Interesting. So you think that we could create in the Baal itself, conditions that are kind of checked on before token transfer, and that wouldn't require us changing this guy at all. We just have an override.
Yep. Yeah.
That seems cool. There's some things I don't like about Open Zeppelin, like context. I still don't understand why they and nobody's using gas station network or whatever.
Yeah.
This is all like very good code though. It's not optimized for gas, but like these are very, very smart people and they audit smart contracts. That's their business model. So like I'm not gonna fuck with that. But there is room for cleverness here, and it does hurt my soul to see that just this ERC20 thing is like longer than the entire like balled out contract size, or at least in terms of like lines of code. That's not that important, you know, it's an aesthetic consideration, but I think there's something to the Moloch spirit where it's kind of hacker culture, and it's like, you know, can we push solidity, and can we also kind of you know, challenge people, and you know, can we do everything in a very, very small code surface?
Yeah, I mean, Open Zeppelin, a lot of it's just like over documenting so that it's accessible for people to use. But yeah, that's where I just like for some of the non-core to Baal things, importing kind of like an ERC20 contract and IERC20, that allows it to kind of like the Baal itself to focus more on what the Baal does rather than having like token logic in the Baal or like partial token logic.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting because there could be different imports that people want to do. Yeah, I think that is, we can create an issue, and I think we should like test that out. But I time it is of an essence here, in that it would be really awesome, and I think competitive, if we were able to start testing in the next 2 weeks and also have a parallel development on a front end. If I can get a grant, you know, through Gitcoin or Metacartel, like that would be ideal. And then if it doesn't seem that hard to do imports, and like I think we should explore that for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to try and time gap myself at like tomorrow night for the import stuff. Just at least for like the ERC20 was the like low hanging fruit because of the tokenized voting shares. I don't think, right, we should necessarily go crazy with like importing contracts, because or importing like all of the ERC20 like fancy like modifiers.
Yeah, like okay, go on.
Yeah, I just had to launch a token contract a week ago, and even with gas low, because it was using like the Open Zeppelin import or NPM package, it just meant the token was like $800 to launch, even with 20 Quay gas.
Yeah, that is always kind of intense. This stuff doesn't matter on XDAI, to be honest, and like I'm almost jealous of people who like only build on Polygon, because they can only think about features and they don't need to think about optimization. And if you're just adding features, that's just like putting together Legos from Open Zeppelin, which is cool, but it's layer one development, I think will always have some sort of like craftsmanship about like following the latest EIPs and trying to have gas costs that are probably look weird. In addition, you know, I think we could have the basic ERC20 import, but then I do think we should avoid, if we want to have, you know, permits, which I've implemented directly into Baal, to not use their system, because we would then be importing all of their building blocks that I think really make this look a lot more like Aragon or something. You know, it's just like, okay, like, you know, maybe we should all just like build on Open Zeppelin, which is maybe the end of all this, you know, to be honest, which is fine. But for the nons, I think we can be strategic. So at the very least, you know, we can use their vanilla ERC20, but I don't think they've tried to optimize, at least on code size and gas, for some of the new extensions. So that's kind of the point of that.
I think there's a middle ground too.
Yes.
I think we can, especially for those when like instead of importing like an entire like crypto library, basically, like it seems like some of those are doing, we can take the file and cut it, right, and just get what we need, and then still import that and have a little cleaner. Well, hopefully not taking up or adding too much code to the
and there's that approach of
doesn't
like,
the optimizer
figuring
take
out,
care of that
you know,
anyways?
you can import ERC20 without importing ERC20 permit, right? Because that's like a huge import versus, a smaller one.
You could
I
add
think-
677 or whatever it is. That's super small, but anyways, I don't know if we need to get into all that. Let's just continue
Yeah.
through the contract.
Yeah, Ross, if you want to continue to dig in.
No, it's all good. But this is the point: is like, is it quixotic to try and put everything into one file? It could be, but to start, if we try that and it works, if it costs more gas, then we should use Up and Zeppelin. If our single file is actually more efficient, like I think even though it's annoying for people to not see kind of the ticky tacky of import from Open Zeppelin, blah blah blah, like if it saves people money, they're gonna have to kind of go this direction. But more to the point, so continuing the code, hard-coded decimals to 18. I cannot think of many good use cases for having different decimals for voting shares. And I feel like that's mostly psychological or something, and we should just hard-code this value because that makes it most compatible with most dApps, right?
Yeah, plus 10,000.
The only thing though is MogB2 shares are only whole numbers.
Right.
Does that mean
yeah,
you're going to
so
be like making a
that
vote
is
with,
true, but-
like this long decimal?
Yeah, that's kind of the tension of having a tokenized share. The Moloch format, which is basically like 1Y is one share, that looks, I think, worse in a lot of ways. For the first point, is that Moloch DAO shares don't show up anywhere because it's all kind of this internal idiosyncratic way of accounting for balances. That's not EIP20. When things are EIP20, most applications and wallets expect them to be 18 decimals. So it does require us to use big numbers for parameters to smooth that sort of issue for users. But like, this is what token dApps do, and I don't think it's like that difficult. And I think generally people want this, and it also reduces a parameter we have put into construction, which avoids stack size limits, I think.
I think
like,
we have to, but I agree. It's just it's just a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, no, none of these things have like a good answer. It's like kind of comes down to like opinions and anticipating like what our users want. Maybe like what won't drive us crazy. If you guys are like, I freaking hate the big number conversion stuff, then maybe this is like we shouldn't hard code that.
Any front end that is dealing with a Moloch DAO is going to be dealing with tokens, so it's going to be dealing with that anyways. So putting it in
I think so.
20% more of the stuff is not going to be, I don't think, an issue. And having the granularity built in rather than having to like summon a DAO with 1 million shares per person is just a significant improvement.
Yeah, it also creates cross compatibility. I feel like that's where it's so annoying when tokens have like 6 decimals or something. I don't know.
Oh my god!
Oh, yeah,
yes.
definitely.
I'm working with like compound tokens right now. It's driving me insane.
Yeah, it's like fuck you,
Anyways,
compound. But anyway,
why? I don't understand. No one's told me why. Is there actually an intelligent reason for
You
USDC?
should probably have
compound?
666 decimals.
yeah. I mean, the 6
I mean,
decimals.
if we could make that a standard, like.
6 decimals is more of a financial convention because that's like the 6th decimal is 1 basis point. But
That's something.
yeah, but I think we're starting a new financial system, so now we're dealing in way rather than basis points.
Yeah, it's like let's max out the fractionalization if we can, right, and make that easy. Cool. All right, so that doesn't seem that controversial. Like whenever you hard code something, I think it should be justified. In terms of other hard codes, these are all kind of set on construction, and they are required for basically verifying off-chain signatures. Off-chain signatures, you guys are probably familiar with like ERC20s that have permits. So instead of having to spend gas to approve somebody or a smart contract to take your tokens, you can do an off-chain signature, and then a relayer or that account that wants to spend your tokens just submits that proof, that signature, the VRS, as a lot of people are familiar with, and then that can actually evoke that approval and for the user's perspective, it's like one transaction, which is, an improvement that kind of all tokens have, because all tokens should have that, Ball shares should have that. So yeah, we added that. I also added from Compound Governance, their delegation signature system. So you can actually, similar to like Moloch V2, where you can say, this person has my votes. They can't rage quit these votes, but they can actually be my delegate and help watch proposals. You can do the same thing here, and it also works with the tokens that are Ball shares. And that's basically me just forking Compound tokens and just putting them into this sauce. Smarter people will actually understand how EIP 712 works beyond me, but I think on the front end, we would basically do the work of preparing these signatures. Tally has a way to do that. I think it's with Tally that I think is a flow that if they open source their front end, we could probably just like take. Let me show you guys what that shit looks like. Blah blah blah. Oh, I'm on Kovan. Fuck. Sorry, one sec. Delegation by signature. Cool. Create new signature. Boom. That didn't do anything. All right. Well, that's a weak point there. So noted. We'll come back to that shit. Anyways, moving
Question.
on. Go on.
For the delegation, how? I guess not for delegation. Never mind. This is an upcoming question. Keep going.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to that. It's a whole thing, right? Cool. All right, so these mappings should be familiar to Moloch DAO. Like we have a proposal mapping by number, which tracks the counter of proposals as they're submitted. Nonces is basically used for these meta transactions. This shit. Members, this is basically identical to Moloch V2. You put in an address, and then you basically read from a struct that has certain details about each member. This is where I put loot. I put the highest index yes vote, which is straight from Moloch V2, and also I put how they vote on a given proposal. That can be useful to reward people for participation in the future. So I definitely kept that from Moloch V2. Other mappings are ERC20 related. Allowance is what gets updated when somebody calls the approve function or successfully verifies a permit signature. Balance of, that's how many Ball voting shares you have. And this is a ERC20 function. So like wallets will pick up your Ball shares, which is always useful. Checkpoints, this relates to transferring Ball shares and delegation. We'll get back to that, but basically the whole, the innovation of compound style governance, which I think borrows from the Aragon mini-me token and the work by Jordi Bellina, is, we want to have transferability of votes, but we don't want double voting. So the way we solve for this problem is we just check balances at given blocks, and that given block is when proposal is submitted. So I think that's the work that does. And this is literally just copy and pasted from Compound. So I'm not doing like any real original work here, and that should make it easier to audit. Delegates is each account can have a delegate, very similar to Moloch DAO. This is also from Compound, and delegates can be updated. Their balances also update if you transfer. So if my delegate is Spencer, I have 1 million Ball shares. He basically has my voting weight. If I transfer my Ball shares, that will then take away the voting weight from Spencer automatically, which is very important. Yeah, to like update that stuff. So you don't have like duplicate voting balances or something. Minions. Oh, this is a big topic. So this is something I try to talk a bit about in the Discord channel, but basically like for modularity purposes, and also to be agnostic to the different ways people want to vet and increase or decrease their membership. A minion contract is basically what is whitelisted that can change those balances. So, the Baal, like Moloch DAO, has the very standard familiar membership proposal track where I have to be, accepted like a country club, and I might make a tribute, or I might just say, I'm a really cool guy, let me in. That's still in here. But there's crowd sales and, other sort of functions that people will invent around adding people to DAOs that I basically wanted to allow through whitelisting. So a minion in the Baal parlance is a contract that is approved that can change the membership accounting logic. Membership accounting logic is the loot and the shares of any account. Those can be minted or burned by calling this function. Clearly, this is a superpower, so that's why I wanted to be whitelisted. But the use case here is like, you know, you might want to have a more open DAO. You might not want to have to do the work of emitting people. You might push that into an external smart contract that has a Merkle root of all the people that can claim shares by calling this function. If we tried to include in the Baal DAO, you know, this small file, all the different ways people want to do this, it would be impossible. And that's kind of the idea of Aragon, Tribute DAO, and these other DAOs. Is like, we can be agnostic to how people want to coordinate or how they want to value and emit members, and how can we do that with smart contracts? There's, you know, I think Tribute has extensions that people can add. Here, we just basically say any contract you approve will be an extension if it's, you know, a minion, and it can do these crazy things to your shares and loot. And that does, like I said, you know, you can do airdrop shares with a Merkle root, or you might have a sale where basically if you attach value or you've approved this minion to take your tokens and you call its function, you would have a sale that's direct. I feel like that's a lot to say about this. Really, this is an attempt to be agnostic and to not only have a country club style membership. Any questions about like member action?
So I
This
think
can be, oh, go on.
just to kind of like echo what you said, I think this does a fantastic job of balancing simplicity with like openness and flexibility in a way that Aragon and Tribute DAO or Lowland or whatever they want to call themselves today, you know, is trying to create these like highly complex systems that make it hard for people to plug in modules. And then their whole plan is to like dominate the ecosystem by building all of their own modules because it's so hard for anybody else to figure out what the hell's going on. The strength of the Moloch ecosystem is we have minions, which are super simple, are easy to integrate with Moloch contract. And this is almost like the next iteration of that, where we're just saying, and to me, it's like admitting, well, the minions have proven to be probably one of the most powerful tools that we've stumbled across in the Moloch ecosystem. So why not allow communities to give even more power to their minions, especially when it comes to managing membership, so that you can be a country club style DAO, or you can be a Merkle, you know, a giant tokenized DAO, or you can transition from one to the other without having to like plug in modules. Yeah.
The transition is to me the most important part. I think we like one thing that has become very clear is that Moloch DAOs are great at right now at a bunch of things, but not so great at some other things. So it can be difficult to transition if your community is transitioning from a Moloch DAO to one of those other things. And right now we sort of force those communities to think about just leaving the Moloch DAO ecosystem, or at least it's a question they have to ask themselves. If we have this, then we open up their world, and they don't ever have to leave their Moloch DAO. They can just upgrade it basically, which I think is super powerful.
I just want to say
So
super useful to me is like thinking about different minions that want to create and not having direct control over the actual like share accounting. So this is I really like this design pattern.
I like that there's this list of minions too. I mean, that's super useful for other things like in the subgraphs and stuff, but this is like super powerful, right? Those two functions, almost scary powerful. Sometimes a minion doesn't need to do that much at all. I mean, I guess the contract doesn't need to call that function, but still, like, I'd just be worried about, someone writing a minion extension and then someone like adding it.
Yeah, right. It first have to be whitelisted. So yeah, it is one of those where with this kind of approach, you have to be super careful about what minions you add to the like special minion list, because you could have other minions that could call other functions in the contract but not have that superpower. But once you do grant a minion that superpower, you're giving them immense control over how membership is managed, which, right, with great flexibility comes
Yeah, it's not
great
Is there a way that
vulnerability.
for could we have minions that don't have that superpower that are also, I guess we could do the similar pattern for the minion now, which just checks the shares or checks a proposal. But
There's a minion that just submits a proxy proposal as normal, right?
yeah,
So I could probably add a bit to this. So, it might be easier to not call the things that affect membership logic minions. These are almost like little neat plugins and extensions. If someone's like, I like the Baal and how it does country club stuff, but I want a crowd sale. That's a big power. That's a big decision and should be vetted. But like, I think that's easier than saying like we need to redeploy our DAO, have a crowd sale, and then we get our membership in order. If you could add a minion that does that, I think people will still go to it, even though it, of course, does introduce this sort of attack vector of like somebody's doing things with your DAO and getting access to capital without going through a formal proposal. But that's always kind of scary. But I do think that people might still dabble with that in lieu of redeploying or deploying a special purpose contract and having to figure out how the crowd sale tokens get wrapped into a DAO or something.
I wonder if we do need a different name, because like the current minion has that action that it can call, and so any minion that had the superpower, anyone could put a proposal through to call one of these functions, I guess, unless we block it from calling against the parent Moloch or.
Yeah, well, the minion would have to be whitelisted to call these functions, but yeah, I feel like there's a better name, like super minion, or what's like the next level up for minion.
Something.
Yeah,
and Gnosis, their kind of super thing is the module, but
what does Tribute call it? Like, I wouldn't want to call it the same thing as Tribute, but like it's nice source or something.
or gosh, well, I'm just trying to think of something within like the Baal Moloch meme.
Right.
Yeah, where it's like priests, high priests, or sacrifices or something.
Yeah. So we should differentiate. I think that the minion meme has been understood by the community to mean something that can't change your shares. It's merely a proxy that does the bidding of the DAO in ways that are beyond the four corners of its deployment code, which is awesome. You can still in the Baal context, use those vanilla minions. The way I see that working is basically like you could have the minion itself submit a proposal to the Baal DAO that then gets enacted or processed through Baal. But I think what makes more sense is like almost to call a minion with an action proposal from Baal. Yeah. You're then sending data to the minion. But the minion, at least in the development I've seen with DAO House, you guys are adding special checks that are beyond what Moloch V2 might do with data. And the reason you do that is because like each contract you call might need special guards, and we can't encode directly into the core DAO contract every guard for every kind of DeFi situation. So minion is kind of taking that sort of automated check logic, beyond members making sure proposal doesn't suck. Like that's a use case for it, and that can still be done in the Baal context. Like we don't want to put every single DeFi guard into the core contract. We want it to be simple. So Baal might send data to a minion that then executes the action if it meets all the checks that the members want, and that can be very kind of a la carte. And that's a big point. It's like what is the core contract that can do basically all the things we think DAOs are, which for me is like DAOs start either in the Moloch sense as a club, that's very familiar to cooperation, and then they are migrating now using minions to do more complicated stuff. Or they start as purely a token, and those tokens might become polling objects if they're staked into a contract to do voting. If they support comp style voting, they're automatically votable. But if we can put all that into the same simple contract, then I think people will just figure things out, and the DAO will become what it needs to be because people have every single tool at their disposal, and the deployment cost should be very low because it's a small contract. And I think we should also kind of what I thought in the Discord panel, like we should have a sort of spectrum approach to deployment. People might have an SPV use case for a Baal, like let's manage this contract for 1 month. You might want a very, very low deployment cost and be okay using the proxy pattern, the minimal proxy. I think it's like ERC 1167 or something. Those tend to cause increased gas costs per transaction. But if you're like, there's only gonna be 10 transactions on this contract tops, like you should use some minimal proxy because it's like way, 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 way cheaper. A Baal that's gonna be managing something over years or even a couple months with a lot of transactions should be done with a normal deployment. And a factory pattern that I think is unique here is we can opt both. And we should also create the opcode. So then it's the same freaking address on every single chain.
Yeah.
And that would be crazy, right? I don't know if anybody has that. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling.
I did just think of a potential name for the minions that can write the member. We should call them shamans.
Interesting.
Yeah, because they can change like the rules of the contract. Yeah, like shaman.
I like it. All right, sweet. All right, so shamans. Did I have like I have like a test checklist.
One of the use cases that mainly people use minions for is like external vaults of assets, NFTs or other tokens or whatever. And they really don't need the superpower, but having that relationship in the core DAO is nice.
Yeah, and I think that's where having the arbitrary function call as like the main DAO proposals flow means it's a lot easier to use those like minions as vaults, because basically you can just create a little minion vault that only allows the right contract to call its like transfer functions or call functions out.
I'm just wondering how we can make a relationship between, so that you can like know which minions are enabled on a DAO from the core contract, even if it's not a whitelisted one.
Right.
Or should they all be whitelisted, I guess.
Well, I think that's probably the nice thing about having or splitting it out between like the shaman level where you have access to membership superpowers versus maybe just like a regular minion where it's more like a tracking relationships type array.
Is that worth the contract storage? If it's not that's changing anything capability wise?
Yeah, I don't know if it is. I mean, that's where like the subgraphs and stuff like that and front ends might be able to take it.
Yeah,
you could probably do the same thing with so adding a minion to an array would require a proposal. So you could just instead do a signaling proposal or something, and then have the subgraph pick that up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think there's not really anything I can think of that's better. It's just weird. The only relationship is from the minion side to a Moloch for the vanilla minion. It just gets a little.
It could even,
funky.
when you deploy a minion, does the Moloch get put into the event? Event?
It's on the minion side, but yeah, I don't know. It's just, it would be nice to be able to query it from the base contract, but not a big deal. So let's not hang up on it. Ross, if you're talking, we lost your sound.
Oh shit. Yeah, I've been talking. Well, that's okay. One thing I want to quickly flag before we move on is the way that the shaman or this so-called minion works is it takes the reaction data from a low-level call. I have a low-level call here for my own neurotic purposes. It bothers me to write an interface that's like one function. And this is kind of the code aesthetic of everything being one file. If this is like too confusing for people, like just we can have a simple interface and kind of move in that direction. But to the point, this is the function signature that is basically like passing the caller, whether it involves shares, and I guess the target. Yeah, okay, cool. The reaction data would be like, 20 shares, then we mint 20 shares. Right.
Okay. What's the unchecked? Because I see what you're doing with like just putting everything into ABI
yes.
like function call, but yeah, I wasn't sure what the unchecked mean.
Yeah, so this really rankles me actually, and it reminds me of, if I can find Moloch. Yeah, like whenever you read these things, like unsafe add to balance, like I always feel like, oh my god, what the fuck. But for security auditors, they love this stuff. They love when something's unchecked or unsafe. It's not fun to read that though. But basically, the point why I did this is I didn't want to use, I guess Yule or the built-in safe math and 0.8 solidity for certain arithmetic operations that I think are obviously not going to overflow. And this is sort of that precarious edge of solidity development where you can really make some dumb mistakes that have big consequences. And that's why I'm glad we can have an audit, and also that this is not a very large contract, so it shouldn't be that hard to check. But basically, if I'm able to do a safe math check, for example, I know that I can do unsafe checks on increasing individual loot if I have a safe check on the total increase of that reaction. So that
that's super cool.
Is it really just
stuff
gas
like that.
savings? Is that the idea?
Exactly. It's like,
I would
yeah,
say,
I know this like sucks.
I know
guys,
that
but
this
like,
sometimes
it's kind of the only way.
explicit's better than
so-
implicit. This is coming from my Python background, but yeah, doing these kind of things just ends up confusing people a lot of times in the future.
I think
So I'd say a small
but it's like-
interface is fine. A small
Yeah.
interface is actually good. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. This is exactly why this can't be built in a bubble or
And using
to
safe math is
my
good too.
illness or whatever. But my insistence here is often on gap optimization, which I really think is where DAOs are going to compete. If something is provably secure after some months or after audits and something's cheaper, that is where users want to go, even if it looks kind of like dog crap and it has a bunch of exceptional language or something.
But
More
wouldn't an interface be compiled down to the same thing you're just writing?
We're talking about two different things.
Yeah, the unchecked
One
is
is the
just
Right, I'm talking about
yeah, you're probably right about the interface though.
ABI.
Sorry, one sec.
yeah, the saving stuff into reaction data. I do think that it saves a little bit, I would guess, because you're storing everything in like a single byte storage slot. But I don't know if that would just be compiled down anyway. I don't know. That's where like I just don't understand like the underpinnings of the EVM well enough to know like, and maybe Ross, you do, and you've thought through this of like, this actually saves significant gas to encode the reaction data and the shares data or share reaction, or
I've noticed some savings, and generally like this kind of like my tutelage and like sushi is just like all these guys doing like raw calls.
Yeah,
like, this is kind of the level.
Well, I mean, sushi is all about raw, but
Oh yeah. But like Uniswap V3, like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really like some of their shit, and I took some of it from Baal. Find it. Where is it? The balance check, like the money. Where are you? Oh yeah, this is so sexy. Yeah, to get a balance, like they're doing a rock haul, and apparently, I don't know if this is an EVM issue, but there's a redundant check involved if you just use a basic interface to check ERC20 balances, and this is where they are able to squeeze a little bit more from the lemon. That is kind of, if we can squeeze some from the lemon, I say we go for it. If this does not become insane, and this is also like the security people will give pushback. They might say like, you need to just make an alias for this in like human speak. Like Boring has here, like he writes a readable string for all of his function signatures. Security auditors like that. I don't like it, but you know, who knows? Anyways, like that. These are some choices I made with purely the goal of how far can I run, and does this end up reasonable? Obviously, it's not clear to me if this is reasonable, but I do think it's very optimized. So that's always the tension with Solidity. It's like readability versus optimization and sanity. Okay, cool. So definitely take a look at that. Proposal submission. This is different from Moloch v2 in that we have a single function, and the way we describe what type of proposal is we use flags. I think, Bill, you have something similar in PeepStyle. In the Moloch v2 system, they have flags for proposal types, but those are under the hood based on the kind of proposal submission function you call. They have I think a submit proposal, which does payments and membership. They have a whitelist proposal. They also have, I think, a rage kick proposal. And that's how they basically figure out what type of proposal it is. I find that a little bit annoying. So that's why I have one function here. In terms of flags, my preference was alphabetical order for proposal types. So, oh, this is actually fucked up. Action, membership, period. This is why we always look at our code, period, and then I want it to be alphabetical because then it's very easy to remember. 0 is an action proposal, 1 is membership, 2 is period, 3 is whitelist. We have a check to make sure that somebody doesn't put in a flag that doesn't make sense. You guys will probably appreciate where this is all going, which is that we're going to have different processing functions that based on the flag, we're going to interpret user inputs to have different things happen. We'll go into the more details because that's kind of like a vague statement to make. We have checks on voting periods. Like I said, these are amendable. This is basically the bounds. So you might have a minimum of 1 day for voting and a maximum of 10 days. As long as it's within 1 and 10 days, this will be a valid proposal. If people in your DAO are like, this is bullshit, like I hate that, they would do a period proposal and say, let's amend these values. I make sure that the arrays match, so we don't have like some weird mistakes. I keep the array length to 10 because I'm scared of people having a proposal to give different members shares, or to call different contracts, and then on processing and not executing all of the data because of like gas limits. This is also why Moloch v2 has a hard code for the amount of tokens you can have in your bank. I didn't see that as super necessary here because like nobody, I think in any reasonable sense, has 200 tokens in their DAOs, but we can come to that if security really thinks that's valid. But I think the more obvious way people will screw up if we have arrays for proposals is to have too many proposal values and then the proposal effectively failing because the EVM sucks, you know? That's that whole thing. That's all obvious. We do the proposal struct creation. We put it in the queue. We have an event that I think should pick up pretty familiar to Moloch DAO, but I think it'd be good to kind of go over the purpose of arrays here. You know, right now in Moloch DAO, you can only add 1 member at a time, make 1 payment at a time, and via minion execute 1 arbitrary action at a time. It's a no-brainer to say like, let's just have an array. these targets and values. That could be payments of ETH from the bank to different accounts. It could be different share weights granted to a series of members. You can also even pick out members while giving shares. So like there's a bit more flexibility. And I think more than flexibility, it's just going to be more efficient. Because I think generally, because it takes like a couple transactions to do anything on Ethereum, we should anticipate that in how proposals are created. And I think Gnosis allows you to chain a bunch of actions together for a single transaction too. And I basically took this from Compound Governor as well. They have arrays for proposals, just because like there's a lot to do.
Sometimes you see like a single versus a batch, just because I think probably a single is a lot more gas efficient, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know why you see that sometimes.
I think a single is easier to understand security-wise versus here's like 8 contracts you're going to call. Every contract we call, I think a DAO should probably understand how it works, and that's a big ask. Yeah, so people might say like one member, one action, because they know it's going to pass because it's very obvious. I think the multi-action stuff is more relevant for DeFi, where often you have to do an approval transaction, a deposit. You might also want to rebalance and take funds out of a contract and put them into another. And that often requires like, burning your Aave token, getting the underlying, and then doing a deposit. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to have a DAO decide to burn tokens and then have another vote on depositing those tokens to something they think is very obvious. And I think that would cause DAOs to be less real time and very conservative, because they can literally only do one thing at a time over a week period. And I think that the format of slow, deliberate processing and proposals is familiar to like venture DAOs, but like I think that's less scalable to like the different types of DAOs that we see in Moloch, which are like guilds that are like now diversifying into DeFi. They're trying to do more complicated things. They want to pay a bunch of people at once. Like I think Baal can help guilds more than like a venture investment DAO here, because those will always be I think very simple. Moloch V1 is maybe the quintessential grants DAO. Moloch V2 quintessential venture DAO. V3 I think can be both of those and more, because we basically like try to abstract things, just by saying like, like you can do anything as long as you approve of it.
So an interesting thing that construction brings up is it doesn't break, but it kind of pushes against the construction of Moloch V2 and V1, where there's always a way for you to vote no, or rather, sorry, there's always a way for you to rage quit from a single, based on a single. There's always a way for you to rage quit in the grace period of a single proposal while having voted yes on everything else. So if you start to smash things together, you lose a little bit of that. That said, I totally see the upside of what you're describing. So I'm wondering, maybe, I guess an open question would be, is this something